Welcome back to another episode of Out of Bounds on the Boomer Bust channel. I'm your host, Terry, and today, talking about, I guess I'll say something that's controversial, but what do we talk about on Out of Bounds? That's not all the time. So, yeah, I don't really want to put too many qualifiers on hit this and make it sound like, some monumental thing that I have to dance around. You know how I talk about these things, and you know the lens that I'm coming from, so it is what it is. What I will say is that we're talking about legal stuff. So when you talk about legal stuff, there's a lot of weeds. There's a lot of weeds to get lost in. And some of it might be jargon, some of it might be boring, some of it might be unfamiliar, all that. But we're talking about the law here. And not to say that that doesn't affect moral and all that. Of course it does. But it is still, it's the law. So we're going to be talking about things that are written by people before and people now. And I always say often, especially in sports, you can make the numbers dance. When you get into law, you realize you can make words dance too if you got enough of them. And so you get all these words, you get all these interpretations, and you really can shift it. Honestly, what I would say is, there is no definitive thing when it comes to the law. Because you can define stuff well as to this is legal, this is not illegal, this is allowed, this is not, this is right, this is wrong. You could define it well to say it's well defined. So objectively, you're doing the wrong thing, but that's just by the law. That's their interpretation. Who really gets to decide what is right and wrong? We're only talking about what's legal and not legal. So there's that. And the last thing I'll say, is I'm not a lawyer. I'm not legally trained, but I have a legal mind. I'm not going to try to convince you. I've taken law classes and stuff for a specific type of law, and I didn't go a legal route. But I do understand a lot of the legal concepts and the way it all works. So anyway, with that being said, let's get into it, because I'll get into my opinion later, but really it's just laying out what actually happened. So what people, and I notice as we go through all these things over the last years, people don't really understand how this country works. As much as they give us the Constitution test and all this other stuff, a lot of people the common person doesn't understand how this country works. So, first of all, the Supreme Court, it wasn't like, let's go figure out, something to do that might cause controversy, or this is just next on our docket. No. What happens in our system, and this is the way people work the system, as you know politicians do. What happens in our system is that the courts can select specific cases to hear that they know is going to have, severe impact on the law or whatever. So this is a specific case. So if you see a lot of people talking about Mississippi and all that, because this is a specific case between, this organization in Mississippi and all that. So they use this case as the excuse to go back into Roe versus Wade and potentially overturn it. And I don't want to speak too strongly, but given the precedence of how the politics and law works, that's what it looks like. They use this specifically to go back to Roe versus Wade. It wasn't I just, happened to see a case, and I guess we'll be looking at Roe versus Wade today. No, there's a lot of people pushing for them to make this change, and so they found the right opportunity to go in and look at it. So what the court came out and said, if you read the actual documents, essentially they said, it's all built on a lot of different things, but I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. So essentially the court said, okay, we have this case. It's on Roe versus, or it's built off Roe versus Wade. That's the, decision that's relevant. And then they said, okay, well, we usually go off stare decisis. which basically means we go off whatever the precedent was set with the prior case. But that doesn't mean we always have to, and we shouldn't always have to. We should be able to challenge previous rulings. But in order to challenge the previous ruling, you have to have a good reason. And so the majority said that we challenged it, or we went back to challenge it because we believe it was ruled incorrectly. And so now we look at how incorrect was the ruling? How bad, what did they miss? And we're going to look at what was the quality of their reasoning and all of that. And we got to make a case for why we should overturn this. So then they basically said that at the time when they made this decision of Roe versus Wade, that the people making the case for the people making the case in Roe versus Wade, they did not set out any real reason as to why abortion is considered a right under the Constitution. Essentially, they said that no, either it needs to be named in the Constitution specifically, and we know how old the Constitution is, but if it's not named in the Constitution, then it needs to prove that it's a significant part of our nation's history or our ability to have ordered liberty. Basically, is it in the fabric of America? And so they said, well, it's not named in the Constitution. We see that. But also, your argument for it's not, or it's part of the American Constitution, essentially, or not Constitution, but fabric, they essentially said, hey, there's no real common law criminalizing it or making it illegal. And this majority said that's not true. If we go back far enough, around the time of Roe versus Wade, majority of the country, of the states in the country, had some type of law and common law criminalizing abortion. It might be stronger in some states. It might be at different points in some states. But most of the country has some type of common law criminalizing it. And then on top of that, they said there was nothing, no ruling, no state law, no opinion, nothing at that time that said abortion was a right. Now, obviously, we'll get to that. So that was their argument. Many people agreed by the number of laws, common laws, that it was illegal. It was a criminal act. On top of that, nobody called it a right. So your argument in Roe versus Wade didn't really hold up. Then they said every case after this, because they're like, look at all the cases where they held up Roe versus Wade. The majority today said that the only reason they upheld that was because of precedent. And that's not strong enough. We still have not got to the root problem of you showing this is a fundamental right under the Constitution, or somehow a strong enough right to be considered in part of the Constitution protection. So that's, in a nutshell, kind of where they are. There's more to it in a lot more detail, but in a nutshell, that's what they're saying. They're saying that Roe versus Wade was built off false arguments and a very weak argument. So then they go on to say that if we, basically, abortion rights was protected under due process, our right to due process, life, liberty, or property. And it's not life, it's not property, so they called it a liberty. And this court, this majority, basically said that it's a very loose definition of liberty. And it's a loose definition of due process. And we don't think that abortion falls under due process. We don't think that you have a strong evidence for that. And then there's the argument that, hey, there's so many rights that's not in the Constitution that's still significant that we upheld. And the majority, again, they say the difference is, and this was said in Roe versus Wade and other cases, the difference is with abortion, there's a very deep moral conflict because you're talking about the right of the unborn human and the right of the mother. And Roe versus Wade put out a framework that balanced the two, by the different timelines of when you can do certain things. They saw that as a compromise. And this majority court today said that other rights that are involved, they don't have this moral conflict. They don't have a loss of life involved. When you're talking about, other rights of liberty, we're not talking about potentially killing somebody. So this has to be considered different. And we don't see this as a due process protection. And so that's their argument. And then they go on to say a bunch of other stuff like, if we continue to have a loose interpretation, that can spread out to prostitution or drugs or blah, blah, blah. And all these, some of these other points. But in a nutshell, that's their argument. And if I'm being honest, the people, the justices that were in dissent and against this, that voted against it, they didn't really put up an argument against it. They essentially said that you cannot make this decision in 2022 based off something in the 1800s. Because if you do, we can go back and say a number of rights that we have today were not present back then. So therefore, it's not deeply embedded in our nation's history. And I think that's true. And so they argue that. They say that you can say that in 2022, an American citizen's idea of individual freedom includes the right to privacy of their body. And that if we continue to look at the lens from back when that decision was made, that there's a lot of stuff we can change that would really hurt our society. On top of that, the majority that voted down Roe versus Wade or overturned it, they said that the court should be neutral. It should not be the court's position to take away the democratic process in which people and their elected officials vote. The biggest thing I think they said is that we want to return that power to the state. We as the court should not be able to take away this majority vote process, to which the dissenters say some things are off limits. And not only is this about abortion, but this case makes the case for all other cases that some things are off limits from majority vote. The elected officials, the people of the state, should not be able to tell me what to do with my body. And that's their argument. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. And I would say it is a very complicated thing, as it always tends to be. And it brings many of the opinions that people wrote bring up this point that it is a couple fundamental questions that come up with this. And I agree, because you have to fundamentally look at, do we go by the letter of the law? Do we go strictly as objective as we can by how the laws was written? Or is there room for reinterpretation? Is there room to update things? And so this is not, this is not the legislative body that is creating laws, official laws. They are making interpretations of law that then affect the laws, but they're not, creating bills or anything. They argue, the majority, that they should just analyze the law and make a decision neutrally. And so then there comes the very human question, because I could honestly say you could, at this point or 3 years from now, you could write an algorithm for AI that could do their job then. What's the point of having humans if, we're just going to go by the strict letter of the law interpretation. There's going to be some subjectivity. There's going to be some human, error in there. And so that becomes the question. Do we go strictly off the letter of law, which we know, don't get it twisted. A lot of this falls into religion. The only reason we're talking about abortion is because of religion. Because your right to do with your body only becomes a moral judgment because of religion. And we all know that our country is founded in a very heavily religious context. So things that were done at that time versus now, they don't hold up. And so again, the question becomes, which lens do you look at it from? Again, because I think if you read the opinions, if you read the back and forth, it is very easily interpreted and turned around for both sides, where you could argue either side. And so there's a lot of questions with this. But at the end of the day, it's about religion. The people that are saying, hey, I don't know you, but you shouldn't be able to get an abortion, they're talking about it for religious reasons. And so, again, there's another question of church and state and, how much should that be intertwined? But our law is intertwined in religion. So there's that. My opinion, I'm firmly, I guess, pro-choice, as they call it. I don't know. I don't really get into this argument too much. And I know it's easy to say because you're not a woman. That's not really it. For me, I don't think anybody should tell you what to do with your body. That's just simple and plain. And so I don't really care about the religion part of any of that. It's just, I don't think they should tell you what to do with your body. Cause that can be a slippery slope, but that's just how I feel. And so, yeah, the people that will argue against it, again, have for religious reasons. And so that's where I stand with it, as far as my opinion personally. As far as what happened today and what this all means, again, it's complicated. I think there's some levels where, again, it's not really up to me. It's up to ask the question, how do we decide things? And then there's some levels that are scary. So you got Justice Clarence Thomas, unfortunately a black man. But the one thing that scares me is reading his opinion, because people are talking about, he's talking about attacking these other laws. Bigger than that, he's talking about removing substantive due process. He wants to take all of that out, just completely out, because he said he says it stretches too far, which I could agree with to an extent. And he says that, again, it's about the process, not about the power to do something. So his point is that we are taking away power from states and other people that they should have, as long as the process is fair. But we are, misusing it. And that might be by the letter of the law, and maybe I'm showing my hand, but I think, in my personal opinion, is there's so much semantics in law that hang people up. And you don't see it in some other countries, where they don't look so much on precedents as they look more at what is the context of today. And we don't do that. Let's look at the precedents. Let's look at the past. And so that's why I said, in some respects, he's right. But that's a dangerous thing to set. And I don't know, again, I'm not illegally trained. I'm not a politician. I don't know enough to know the answer to this. But my question would be, can we, and if we can't, why can't we simultaneously take down one thing while creating another? Why can't the court, instead of saying, here's our ruling, and now today, states today are like, this is illegal, you can't do that? Why can't we say, here's our ruling, we're going to compel, or not compel, but we're going to ask the Congress to think of a new bill, think of a new law. If you say that abortion doesn't fit under due process, then where does it fit? Where does it fit? Where does it make sense? Can we amend and put that into effect? And can we put those two processes together? Because as it stands right now, it's done. Supreme Court wiped their hands, they're done. And now it's going to be up to all the other, bodies to figure out if and when they can make something to replace it. And I just feel like that makes more sense to me. Like if you say due process is stretched out too far, disability for gay marriage, for contraception, for abortion does not fit under there. Well, how about we say that and also implement something that puts it in the right place? Why can't we work together that way? So that's what scares me, because if you attack substantive due process and everything else, then you're talking about dismantling a lot of key things. And then we don't have recourse to fix it quickly. It would have to go through a long process with Congress. So yeah, it's very sticky, and it's very it's complicated because it does set up a lot of things. But all of this, I will say, at the end of the day, it doesn't move me deeply. And again, you can easily dismiss because I'm a man, and that's fine. I understand that. But it doesn't move me deeply because it's the symptom of a bigger problem. As I talked about, the way our system is structured doesn't help. But also, this is the symptom of us not voting, or the symptom of people voting that have their interest. And I don't know. I don't know what the common conservative thinks. Maybe the common Republican who's poor also believes in this. Or maybe the powerful Republican that has this agenda wants it done. And the poor Republican that gets impacted by this isn't necessarily for this. But it's the powerful people that vote. We don't vote in masses. And on top of that, our system is set up for the powerful people to influence decisions anyway, even if we did vote. So a lot of people don't go out and vote locally and abroad. A lot of people don't hold their politicians accountable, and this is the result. So I'm not shocked. I'm not appalled. I mean, I have lost a lot of energy for this country, and this is just another chapter in that. And so, eventually you don't have any energy left. This is how our country operates until we stand up and demand change. So, again, was it the right or wrong one? It could be argued either way in the court of law. And I would advise you to actually read and, try to figure this stuff out. But I tried to give you a simple version. So anyway, that's it for me. Go down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Share it around. Get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you for going out of bounds.